futuro se ha formado un andamiaje. De rito con un mensaje del pasado hacia el futuro. Con mi jarana conjuro en la tarima un hechizo, reunidos a ras de piso. Con gusto puedo decir el tejido a revivir en el fandango fronterizo.
Okay, buenas noches todos.
Buenas noches.
Welcome everyone and good evening. Welcome to the series Deep Roots, New Branches, presented by Early Music Seattle. My name is Tony Gomez. I'm the host for the series. And tonight it's my special pleasure to welcome a very dear friend and musical collaborator, someone who I consider to be a treasure here in the Northwest, who is a keeper and caretaker of music, both old and new, from many different corners of Latin America. Please welcome Abel Rocha. Abel.
Muchas gracias. Thank you, Tony. Wow, that's quite.
All right. Oh, and let's see. I don't hear you. I don't have your audio. Let's see.
Got it?
Of course, we had it when we started, so that's how it goes sometimes. So Abel is with us this evening from Seattle. And Abel, can you just check to see if you're on mute or not? Oh, others say that.
I think I'm open.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm not sure why I can't hear Abel all of a sudden. Abel, would you go ahead and say something again?
Yeah. You hear me? I can put more volume, maybe.
Okay.
Let me see.
All right. Everyone can hear him except for me. Oh my goodness.
Can you hear me better? What about now? Yeah?
So while we figure that out, we're going to go ahead and start our program this evening, and I will figure out a solution to that issue. And it wouldn't be a webcast program if we didn't have an issue with something going into it. So, but you know, we are getting close to the point where we're going to be able to have more live programs in the future. So I'm very much looking forward to that.
Yeah.
This evening we are talking about the subject Arte y Justicia is our subject for tonight, and that is the idea of looking at the idea how in Latin America and among Latinos here in the United States, there is a long tradition of music in connection with social movements, in connection with efforts towards justice and identity, and this is something that is not new. That's not certainly it's something that is part of the moment, but it is also something that is well, to phrase from the series, it has incredibly deep roots. So I'm especially excited to talk about the deep traditions of music, of conscientization and music of social justice movements, and also look at how that plays out today. So Abel, I understand you have brought a song to start off the evening, and this is music that is coming from the nueva cancion tradition, as I understand.
Yeah.
Would you go ahead and tell us a little bit more about about the song that we'll be starting off with tonight?
Yeah, I think Chilean people of that time, they call it better Canton Nuevo. It is basically, we are talking about the same, but in different countries have different names, Nueva Cancion, Canton Nuevo, etc. The song I'm going to play is Arriba Quemando el Sol de Violeta Parra. It's a beautiful song and very, very towards justice, expressing justice on earth. So, especially in Chile. So, here I'm going. Cuando fui para la pampa llevaba mi corazón contento como un chirigüe, pero allá se me murió. Primero perdí la pluma y luego perdí la voz. Y arriba quemando el sol. Cuando vi a los mineros dentro de su habitación, me dije mejor habita en su concha el caracol. A la sombra de las leyes el refinado ladrón y arriba quemando el sol. Las hileras de casuchas frente a frente, sí señor. Las hileras de mujeres frente al único filón, cada una con su balde, con su cara de aflicción, y arriba quemando el sol. Si alguien dice que yo sueño sueños de ponderación, digo que esto pasa en Chucky, pero en Santa Juana es peor. El minero ya no sabe lo que vale su dolor y arriba quemando el sol. Me volví para Santiago sin comprender el dolor con que pintan las noticias cuando el pobre dice no. Abajo la noche oscura, oro sale del carbón y arriba quemando el sol. Y arriba quemando el sol. Y arriba quemando el sol.
Bravo, gracias, Abel. Thank you so much. And tell us the name of the song again.
The song is called Arriba Quemando el Sol. And talking about the song a little bit more, I think Violeta had the magic of doing songs with the essential words that need to be done, not more, not less. It was so precise in the right way to get to your heart, but with a lot of consciousness all the time. She was one of my best inspirations for music of this topic. So that's Violeta Parra.
And tell us a little bit about your own experience when you were growing up in Mexico City. How was it that you were introduced to the new song movement in Chile and the music that perhaps started as popular music, as music of the people, folkloric music, and then became music of solidarity and music of social change? How were you first introduced to this musical movement?
Well, I got introduced in different ways, I hope to be articulated in my memories and expressing it. But basically, I was in the right place at the right time in Mexico City in the early 70s. And already there were a lot of singers and a lot of things happening, being heard in Mexico City, because my aunt, for example, worked for Aerolíneas Argentinas. She brought me records that had the message of this, that it was already well established, because in Argentina and in Chile, but especially that time in 71, 72, Argentina already had a big, um, um, there were already singers, songwriters writing strictly about what it was songs with deliberate message, being social and being the voice of the oppressed people, you know. But this has existed all the time, as you said. Um, then what happened then is that I was pretty much as many Mexicans of that time lucky enough to receive to see in Mexico City musicians, bands, singer songwriters, poets that were actually banned in their own countries. That was especially the case of Chile. We received frequently visits of Inti Illimani, Quilapayún, and we actually managed to see them in theaters and everything. Mercedes Sosa and many others, and that was a magical time. Horacio Guarani, many names that it would take us too long to remember them and name them, but definitely amazing performers, interpreters, songwriters of these movements. And in their country, like I mentioned, it was they already having a tough political situation. Inti Illimani ended up living in Europe. They could not come back eventually in a tour, and they end up living in Italy for many years because the situation in Chile. Mhm.
Yeah, and U.S. audiences are probably familiar with the idea of artists, particularly in the 60s and early 70s, using their art form, using music to advance certain causes. So, in the U.S., of course, we have Joan Baez
Yes. Hmm.
Harry Belafonte, and going back into the 50s, Woody Guthrie would be another example of artists with a great sense of kind of socially conscientious music.
Hmm.
Um, but what U.S. Audiences may not be familiar with is the absolute gravity of what it meant for Latin American artists to take a stand
Right.
in their music. I want to go really quickly to a clip of another Chilean artist named Victor Jara,
Absolutely. Hmm.
and we'll hear a little bit of Victor's music, and then we'll talk a little bit about what did it mean for artists like Victor Jara, Inti Illimani, or in Brazil, Caetano Veloso and Gilberto Gil, to go against the grain, to do music of protest. So let's hear from Victor Jara first. And this is obviously there's no HD footage of Victor Jara, but this is from a program from many years ago.
Aprieto firme mi mano y hundo el arao en la tierra. Hace años que llevo en ella. ¿Cómo no estar agota? Aprieto firme mi mano y hundo el arao en la tierra. Hace años que llevo en ella. ¿Cómo no estar agota? Vuelan mariposas, cantan grillos, la piel se me pone negra y el sol brilla, brilla y brilla. El sudor me hace surcos, yo hago surcos a la tierra sin parar. Vuelan mariposas, cantan grillos, la piel se me pone negra y el sol brilla, brilla y brilla. El sudor me hace surcos, yo yo hago surcos a la tierra sin parar.
Right. A little bit of music by Victor Jara from Chile. And, one of the things that is striking to me seeing that footage of Victor is his presentation. I mean, this is the 1960s, and, the international commercial popular music is, you know, taking the whole world by storm. I mean, everyone's across the globe listening to jazz, listening to rock and roll. Um, and then here's this artist who is just with his guitar working in this folkloric idiom, wearing a poncho, appearing on this television program and singing music that connects to the land, connects to the people, and then ultimately to the issues and the interests of the people. And it's almost, it is an indicator of kind of a counter current, I guess, to that moment of international pop culture. How did how did you receive that that wave from where you were, from your own experience growing up, Abel?
Well, that's a very interesting question because definitely in my country there was tons of pop music, but my family, actually, my father was very strict about what we could hear, what we don't hear. He kind of always kind of influenced us, or he actually pushed the button to what to listen. Thanks to my father, I saw Italian movies instead of seeing American movies, and many other things that have been very influential in my life. But with that said, what I was going to say is that um, I actually, when I was a child, I hear corridos, Mexican corridos, and the Mexican corridos is a mixed bag of some songs that have pop feelings and have been uh, commercial music or record companies like to exploit and make bigger the topic. But as well, I have to say, there are well-written songs so many times, and it's genuine the feeling, but also at the same time they have the other face, which are um, songs with conscientious topics, So that's how I kind of received that mixed bag. I was not conscious what it was, the compartments of each very clearly. In such a because the phenomenon is incredibly complex, So we can talk hours and hours about what it meant for in each country and what it was the situation more or less in each country. But that's how I received it. I received music from Violeta Parra, Victor Jara, Atahualpa Yupanqui, Jose Larralde, Jorge Cafrune, and many influences that were more or less, and they were very supported by my family, basically. I think that was an accident. My parents, my father came from the bolero tradition, but in my house was more her corrido son jarocho, son huasteco, it's a long time. So kind of that.
And I'm glad you brought up your father. And I had the privilege to meet your dad a couple summers ago when we were in Mexico City with Trio Levine.
Yeah.
um, I remember celebrating his birthday, and he just was so full of music, and he sang. And well, there's two things I wanted to talk about. One is, would you share with us the place that your dad oftentimes shared music? Like, where was it that he sang? And then I want to return to the birthday celebration, and kind of the role of, of the family gathering in music.
Where we, uh, well, actually, my father kind of pushed me to be singing, and that's, I think, my main instrument since then, since I was 5 years old, stuff like that. Another very, very, very important figure was my uncle. My father and my uncle had made a trio previously, long, long time ago, a romantic musicians to be much deeper, go much deeper, and learning more songs. My father initiated, but my uncle kind of really, he wanted me to play guitar, and I at that point I did not like guitar. I was just so he said, okay, you don't play guitar, but then I play the guitar for you and you sing songs, you know. And since then, I playing mostly, so that's pretty much was big part of my life.
And
So
and I'm also thinking about how your dad sang on the buses, right?
in, but now it's actually has in the street. It's actually has is less of an effort. My father is very old now, and of course, buses it would be impossible at his age right now. So I'm glad that he's doing it more comfortably and just whatever he can do.
Yeah, and I was struck how
Yeah.
your dad had this experience of singing on buses, but then also the whole idea of what you experienced growing up of singing in familia, singing in family, and that idea of music as a participatory activity. Whereas I think here in the United States, we've we've ventured pretty far from that in terms of music as a participatory, familiar kind of thing. It has become a form of entertainment, a form of spectacle. Which, and it's not to say that it isn't those things in Latin America or other parts of the world, um, but to have a living tradition of people gathering and singing at home and passing songs, I think really speaks to the connection that music can have over time. So, as we're talking um, with regard to early music Seattle and the idea of what is early music, um, we are challenged to kind of open up our understanding of what early music as not saying music specifically from a certain time and place, saying, okay, it's music from the 17th and 18th centuries or 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries in Europe, but the idea that it is music that is held and passed in kind of a slow form, right? In terms of
Mm.
family to family, generation to generation, and and that in essence is that we see early music, um, we see iterations of it in current practices of popular music or folkloric music, um, and uh, and so it was really wonderful, for example, to see that in your family. And I know that that's been my experience in other places, in Argentina and in Panama, in Cuba, where music with deep roots is passed on person by person, and
Mhm.
not necessarily always through concertizing or through performance.
Oh yeah. Hmm.
And I want to also talk about you know coming back to this idea of that connection between popular music, not in the sense of pop as in commercial pop, but in the idea of música popular, in the sense of music of the populace, music of the people, and in particular how the new song movement, the nueva cancion or canto nuevo, in Chile, for example, or in Argentina, took that one step further um, to use music to embody the interests of the people in a very particular moment. It became the soundtrack of a popular movement, and and for a while as resistance to the military dictatorship of um, Augusto Pinochet, and and some of the artists paid dearly for that. You mentioned Inti Illimani being sent into exile. Certainly, there are a number of Chilean artists who live in the United States to this day that left Chile during that time. And then artists like Victor Jara, who paid who made a supreme sacrifice.
Yes.
Um, do you want to share with us a little bit of the story of Victor Jara, Abel?
Well, actually, the Victor Jara story, I would probably would say more about that time and what it encompassed. I know better. The details of Victor Jara is that he was uh, basically tortured and killed, and he just actually that magnified his image and everything. It was uh, they couldn't stop them, basically, and that's a proof of whatever it is, the Canto Nuevo. It's something that it goes beyond. Music has to be transmitted to records on a commercial way, but that doesn't mean that, as you said, is pop. It means a lot more than that. Some anthropologists and sociologists in Mexico, for example, propose the term música de masas to differentiate this music that is the main goal, make money, for companies and stuff, and music that is meaningful, and we know where we are talking. Um, so, but if we talk about a little bit about Chile, for example, it's a very interesting um, story because the Canto Nuevo, which had to highlight it that they did songs with social content, which actually a lot of folk music is social content. The folk music has many songs before, but I think Canto Nuevo also wanted to be not only that. The only To me, Canto Nuevo created another form. It was highly cosmopolitan. It was not just folk music that came from the countryside. It had a language, and I'm not talking just about the language spoken in the lyrics. It had also a language in the music itself, um, with a little bit new ideas that were very cosmopolitan and very many, and it brought many things that were a highly cosmopolitan language to express to the world what it was going on. Victor Jara did songs to Vietnam, had friends from the United States that were in the same boat, protesting songs and stuff. I forgot the name of a very, very important singer-songwriter in the United States that was a very strong friend of Victor Jara. Um, and although I have to say, Violeta, in the meantime, before the coup star exploded, she was in Spain, and she did songs with a lot of meaning of, of activists that were actually killed in Spain when the Franquismo was also very strong and the Republican, but those Republicans, not the American Republicans of Spain, uh, had to escape to. They were also refugees in Mexico, for example. We had a large community of migrants, and there were also very important songs that talk about that time in Spain. So there was a solidarity movement, and the Canto Nuevo put that together. And also, they were very interested in call it Canto Nuevo because there was another movement in Chile called neo folklore that highlighted. They sometimes had very good musicians, but with very good arrangements, but they just did arrangements on songs that were more pop with good quality, but those songs that never wanted to talk about politics, never wanted to talk oppression, never wanted to talk unequal things in the society. So the Canto Nuevo parallel, because we have to remember that even Chile was shaken by this coup, there was also neo-Nazis in Chile too. And a lot of people actually did not like all the Canto Nuevo, and they wanted the neo folklore, But of course, the majority was with Violeta Parra, Victor Jara, Inti Illimani, and all of these people.
Yeah,
So
yeah, that's interesting what you share too. And I'm thinking about in an earlier presentation that we did in this series with Ben Hunter. We talked about roots music in the U.S. and the idea of how roots music can be made kind of safe, right? It can be divorced of the situations. in which it's occurring, and thinking about issues around, for example, bluegrass here in the United States. And in all of these examples, we have this kind of, I think there's also this marriage between this musical form that perhaps has a lot of history to it as a popular musical form, and then also it is wedded to the current moment, and so it becomes early music not as a practice of a reproduction of a historical form or a museum piece. It's actually taking the art form that may be early in nature and making it very much contemporary, very much in the moment. And I'm thinking about how that has happened, not only with Nueva Cancion and Canto Nuevo, but also, in the forms that you work with and your own compositions that you do, where you're working, in the form of decimas,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
which is a rhyming scheme that has centuries
Right.
of history to it. Tell us a little bit about that space where you work that has kind of a nod to the past and to these historic forms, but is also in this moment that we're in the 21st century.
Yeah. Well, the decima, it's a form that took off incredibly in Latin America. Spain came from, I forgot the name of supposedly the one creator of the form, but it's called Decima Espinela because Espinel was the last name of the person who created the decima. It has a format, 10 lines, 8 syllables each line, that has different, sometimes when it's accented, it becomes 7 syllable, etc. It's a highly challenged to do decimas because it's then you got a form of rhyming. It has to have a rhyme that has to more or less correspond to the format. So the rhymes is a magic thing because uh, to me reinforce a truth or something that it wants to be stated. It's a statement. It reinforces the rhyme, but at the same time, the all composers and all the singer songwriters, including me, uh, deals or struggles with saying exactly what we want to say in that format, and that's the challenge. So anyway, needed to say, the cimistas have been a very interesting per se juglar in Latin America. People who say things that are important. There have been more or less corridos that are more or less written in decima, which tells you the story of something that happened to someone or things like that, or funny things. A lot of the decimas are in some places very funny, and they tell you funny stories. There's this traditional format that I've seen that, for example, and I've seen it in different countries, in Cuba and Veracruz, for example. And it's a format of, they call it canciones de mentiras. And they tell you a bunch of things that are impossible, like a frog was fighting with a mouse or things like that. And everything is like a challenge of saying mentiras, but all of course in rhyme. It's a funny thing. And Veracruz, that existed. But as well, people like, for example, in Mexico, somebody who took off this format to a political or to a very social consciousness topic is Guillermo Velázquez, for example. Guillermo Velázquez and Los Leones de la Sierra del Quichú, which took the tradition, and the tradition already was highly um, expressive in terms of anything. And that anything, everything, took also the inequalities and the social discontent. There were already previous singers that expressed that, but Guillermo Velázquez has been somebody who took it out to an incredible place, and he's very cosmopolitan because he also was big time in Mexico City and also knew a lot of the tradition in other states. and he has expressed all kinds of topics, brilliant songs expressing destinies. But there are many. I'm not attempting to say that is absolutely the only ones. It's a huge tradition. It's a huge tradition.
And I want to give a shout out to everyone who's joining us this evening, especially my mom and dad. Hey guys, who just texted me and I put it in the chat here. Vicente Espinela
Yes.
is the we're talking about. And it's also a great reminder. This is interactive, so if you have questions or comments, please put them in the chat. Share with us what your thoughts are, what your questions are. We're going to be darting around. We're talking about Canto Nuevo, and now we're talking about Décimas, and you know, a couple of things that you've talked about already, Abel, remind us of the way that earlier forms are still alive and thriving. It's not like they've died out completely and they have to be recreated. Like we have to, you know, necessarily, you know, kind of reanimate them because they're still alive and they're still evolving. I'm trying to think of like a parallel, and you know, with artists working in the form of a decima or corrido, it's almost like saying, you know, that English speaking artists are going to work in iambic pentameter. You know,
Mhm.
this idea of this poetic or musical structure that has been existing for centuries and that it continues to be used. And I want to look at some other examples of that across Latin America, and then here with Latinos and Chicanos here in the United States. And in particular, I want to spend a little bit of time on son jarocho, which also has a tradition of verses that are established, but also verses that are improvised in the moment and that need to fit certain structures, but can speak to the moment as well as to heritage and culture. And I wanted to share two clips back to back. One is a group, some friends of ours from Mexico City, some members of Tembembe, and they are giving an incredible example of music as resistance in the Americas. They're playing a very old song, Chuchumbe, which it was a song that was actually banned by the Inquisition, and part of a style that was banned by the Inquisition in Mexico. And the great thing about this video is that they're performing Chuchumbe in the central patio of the seat of the Inquisition. So it's kind of like in the same building from which the Inquisition ruled, they're now playing El Chuchumbe. And so I want to take a look at that clip. Just bear with me one second as we find that. And it's not great video quality, but it gives you an idea of the music, that it's not only music with lyrics of social change or social movements and justice, but it's the music itself that is part of this process of what Ben Hunter talked about on a previous episode about music is itself the resistance. Music is that the action. It's not just telling the story of the action.
Absolutely. Hmm.
Yeah. So here's Tembembe doing El Chuchumbe. And bear with me, folks. This is coming from a post from our friend Eloy Cruz and directly from Facebook. So here you go. I'm going to just pause it just for a second. But we're going to see another example of Son Jarocho. But I love this clip. Um, uh, and oh, thank you, Leslie, for the feedback on the volume. I will make sure that the volume on the next clip is a little stronger. Um, and I will also put in the chat the name of the song so that you can find it. Um, and the group is Tembembe, um, which is a group that's well known in early music circles, but which again kind of straddles the past and the present. And I just love the way that they're playing this song that was music as resistance, not because of what it was saying necessarily overtly or explicitly, but because of who was playing it and the instruments and the rhythms and the tonalities and the way that it was absolutely scandalous to have music that represented this African indigenous European blend that was the Mexican reality for those folks. And the power structure was like, no, this is not acceptable. This is, it's immoral, and it's just it's going to make people dance too much for one thing, and just kind of this kind of hegemonic ruling by the Inquisition. And in this way, music itself is that resistencia, is that leaning towards justicia.
Mm-hmm.
And that tradition continues to today. I want to look at another clip that is an example from. This is from a project called Fandango Without Borders, but it's part of the Fandango Fronterizo, which son jarocho music, or music of the fandango, is music that is a traditional style, but it has had a resurgence, kind of a renaissance, not only in Mexico, but here in the U.S. Here in our area, there's the Seattle Fandango Project, for example. There are similar community-based collective music efforts anchored in son jarocho, up and down the West Coast, the Bay Area, LA, San Diego, but also Chicago, New York, many different places where we find Mexican American communities. Abel, would you share with us, before we go to that clip, would you share a little bit about, what is son jarocho? What is this tradition, and what are the elements of it historically?
Well, it's such a huge topic, but I would say that the son jarocho I knew in the beginning when I was listening music, it was the son jarocho from the port, and that had a different rhythm, had harp. Not, I mean, first of all, I'm going to say the harp in Veracruz was had long time ago, but the harp played as son jarocho was a different one since a long time ago. And that was, I believe, in Mexico City, for example. Because one thing we have to say is that not all the styles of son, this regional form, was known in the country at the same time. Sometimes we took long time to hear a genre and style and decimistas. So continuing with the topic of son jarocho, 50s, 60s, 70s, 70s is the time where I started to hear it more deeply. I hear this version of the Puerto. People, bands like Los Costeños, Lino Chavez, a big tradition that had been here and had been here also in Los Angeles before, and in California, certain part of California. At that time, in the early part, it was not here very much the sones de Sotavento. What is the sones de Sotavento? The Sotavento then is the son jarocho more as we know it now, as the song that, for example, Chuchumbes played, and has an incredible rich tradition where the harp was absent, but because also represents another regions inside that are actually very ancient in Veracruz style. And groups like, for example, Los Vega, Mono Blanco, they were like the pioneers, as far as I know. And the continued kept, but those then are the ones being the ones showing this how big is the concept, you know, and it has way more repertoire and it's played also in another rhythm, you know, and it's not anymore just the rhythm that serves to dancers in ballet folkloricos. It's also, not to say that it's not dance, it is dance, but in a different steps, you know, different. So it's an incredible phenomena that not because it didn't exist, it has existed all the time, but we get to know it. And then you go get to know it, like you mentioned, in all the United States, and gets sympathy with all these communities that are Mexican Americans and have very good ideas to it and bring to it more interesting sounds. Since ever, I think since the first festivals of Tlacotalpan that I used to go and visit, it for some reason the son jarocho that I heard was very open-minded and let jam musicians of all kinds. I went to Tlacotalpan and hear some bands that were even jazz bands and they were allowed to play, you know. But as always, a lot of the best things happen in the cantinas after the festival, because people from the puerto, from the place, were like very free to not schedules and do endless songs, improvising and things like that. But that's pretty much what I say. And of course, it's big time in decimas and all kinds of improvisation lyrically and musically, you know, but it has a large repertoire that is well recognized and it's a universal language. You know La Bamba, you know El Toro Sacamandú, La Guacamaya, you know El Colás, and then you get to play it.
Yeah, and Quetzal Flores from the rock band Quetzal talks about Son Jarocho as the blues of Mexico. This idea of a musical style that has room for improvisation, that has both music and dance, lyric and instrumental, and is also rooted in the experience of the African diaspora in the Americas, just like the blues in the U.S. is. Um, and and so it's interesting to see new generations of Mexicanos and Mexican Americans embracing this music as kind of a musical expression of the complexity of our identities. Um, and this next clip that I want to share comes again from the Fandango Fronterizo, or the Fandango Without Borders. And this is a gathering that happens frequently where musicians on both sides of the border gather to share music. And we'll just see a short piece of a clip from that program.
This is Friendship Park, and this is where we have the Fandango Fronterizo every year. It's a gathering of musicians on both sides of the U.S.-Mexico border fence.
Yo soy Carolina Martínez y soy parte del comité organizador del Fandango Fronterizo. Es la oportunidad de poder celebrar un lugar que causa mucho dolor para las comunidades emigrantes y transformarlo en una fiesta. Es una forma de resistencia también, pero celebrando y haciendo música es toda una contradicción.
My name is Maya Jupiter. I'm a hip-hop artist. Logically, I know that we're close to Mexico, but you never think about that you can reach out and touch it.
My name is Israel Aranda. I live in Minneapolis.
And I'm going to just pause it there in the interest of time, but I just think this is so powerful on so many levels. The idea of a musical form that has such a long history to it, that is basically the musical blueprint of Afro-Mexican heritage, and how it has become this tool for a statement that is social and political, but also festive. And I think that what I'm reminded by the comment in Spanish was this idea that music of resistance, music that addresses challenging issues doesn't always have to sound serious, and that's so true in Latin America, particularly. I'm thinking of like in Brazil, where you can hear a samba and you're moving, you're dancing, but it's filled with social critique at the same time. Um, and we hear this in the Caribbean with reggae and also plena,
Hmm.
which I'd love to talk about in a minute. Um, but this idea of these living music traditions, um, and well, I'll stop there for a second. And Belle, if you have something else that you wanted to add there.
Well, I think I would add that I think the son jarocho, um, it also was one of the probably by the intellectuals and by people here in Mexico was one of the first genres also where the African influence is recognized deeply. But I think that African influence is everywhere. I think it's everywhere, and it's just a matter of time to because we have we have come from a tradition of sometimes not seeing the black people playing and thinking that there's no influence of of African music. And of course we have changed that, so gradually we're seeing that, it's in Guerrero, it's very strong, the influence of Guerrero and stuff. But something happened with the son jarocho that is very interesting, that it has become part of it is because, well, I guess was the gate, the Gulf of Mexico was the gate of discovering Mexico, first, and then um, all that tradition, all what it has happened in Veracruz has been very important for centuries, as historians like Antonio Garcia de Leon has written many books about it. Um, it was part of the Caribbean trade. It's like an incredibly rich blend of stories, and of course African, but many others. So, but it's very interesting to say also that we are actually discovering more the African influence in a beautiful way, and sometimes we'll be able to enhance our language, our musical language, and everything with other communities like the Michoacan community in Mexico and United States, for example. It's that got related with the mariachi music, with the ancient mariachi music, and all of these forms that have powerful messages and powerful roots to that are still alive, in many
Yeah,
ways.
yeah. And I'm also thinking about, well, I have a question for the audience, and go ahead and put in the chat. My question for you as we get ready to talk about the next topic is, how do you get your news? And where do you hear editorial commentaries on current events? So put that in the chat, where you get your news. Um, because uh, that's going to relate to what we're going to talk about next. But coming back to what you were saying, Abel, this the idea of Arte Justicia, the theme for tonight, art and justice, is not just again not just music or art about social justice issues, but when the music and the art become the social justice issues,
Yes.
because
Hmm.
they are emblematic of the people and the experiences of the people.
Hmm.
And I'm thinking about even just, whether it's Diablos in Mexico or Peru or Dominican Republic or Carnaval in Brazil, that these artistic moments are become moments of flipping the power structure, flipping the narrative. It's a point where people can insert themselves when people have been erased from the official discourse, that they can express who they are culturally, so that even if for example, the people of the favelas in Brazil, working people, poor people become the kings and queens of Carnival. They become the people that reign over Carnival, and it is a time when the racial and political structures of Latin America are flipped upside down, um, with with um, with people asserting themselves. Um, and so I think about that with regard to son jarocho and how it is another expression and assertion.
Hmm.
Um, of heritage that is not just Hispanic, so to speak, but is African and indigenous at the same time.
Yeah.
And all in this package of these, these centuries old musical structures that never really went away, but just continued to take on new life and evolve. Um, I want to jump over to folks' comments here. I asked you where you get your news and your political commentary. I see Seattle Times, Facebook, New York Times, online with Google News, CNN, MSNBC, CBS, BBC, and so on, and Pocket on the Firefox homepage. These are all places where people get their news. But if we think in an early music and early society context, where did people get their news, especially if you did not have that privilege of being able to become literate, of accessing a school or educational program where you could become literate? It was on the street, it was in the conversations, it was even the callers and the minstrels and the troubadours that would maintain these current events in circulation. And the fascinating thing about that is that's still happening in Latin America. And
Yeah.
I'm thinking about how artists play that role. And it's not that people aren't using social media and the web and television and radio to get news, but that current events still have a life, still have a heartbeat in the artistic repertoire of the of where we are. And I want to pay respects to another tradition. This one is coming from Puerto Rico, and Puerto Rico has different traditions like bomba. The one I want to talk about tonight is called plena, and this is a style of music that's played on frame drums, which of course have a deep history in many parts of the world. But pleneros would share news and comment on political situations through song using this ensemble of frame drums. So I have a historic clip of plena, and then I have a contemporary clip to see kind of this contrast. And I should say too that a lot of the music we're talking about tonight, nueva cancion, corridos, décimas plena, son jarocho, they're all in the playlist that was created for tonight's program. I put the link in the chat. It is a Spotify playlist that is on the Early Music Seattle Spotify page, and it's just called Early Music Seattle, Arte and Justicia. But let's take a look at a clip of kind of this is a mid-20th century presentation of plena, but plena goes much deeper than that. It has always, for many centuries, been a source of Afro-Caribbean music that is used to comment on political situations and social situations. So this is a historical image of plena, and then we'll look at the more contemporary example as well.
La plena, satírica, juguetona, irónica en su contenido, aprovechando como el romance español lo circunstancial del momento para comentarlo y elaborarlo.
¡Suéltalo, suéltalo!
Esa cosa tremenda de que una vengadora tintorera se tragase al abogado americano de la Guánica Central.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there, but this is an old program that is on YouTube. and we see some examples of plena, and I think one of the things about plena when we talk about it in early music context and first, and then music of social movements second. Here's a music form that is still current. There's still pleneros that are recording to this day, but it's a music form that is symbolizing a lot of the reality of what it means to be Latin American. I mean, there's African rhythms, and then a function of the music as social commentary that we heard in the narration. For those who speak Spanish, the narrator says, la plena, satirical, ironic, and very much like the romances from Spain, and these popular songs that have heritage but also capture the current moment. And so I just think it's just incredible to think about how early music is not only, I mean, we don't have to look at early music in a display case as something of the past that is now like an animal that has been stuffed in a museum, right? It is something that is living and breathing, and we see examples of this in all these different forms that we're talking about tonight. This next clip, and then I want to end with a song. Abel, I want to invite you back to share a song, but we'll just take a really quick look at a clip of a plena group that is a contemporary group, and it is called plena. The group is called Plena Combativa, and these are pleneras feministas from Puerto Rico that use the plena as a medium to share, very contemporary messages about the dignity and rights of women. They're using this, incredibly historic art form that combines Spanish and African influences. So I know our time is limited tonight, and there's so much great music to hear and see. But again, just a really great example of how these roots that we associate with early music of the past, continue to grow and flourish and become the soundtrack of popular movements and popular struggles in Latin America to this very day. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight, and in particular, Abel, muchísimas gracias. Thank you so much for being with us this evening and sharing your own story, your own experience of these musical traditions. Do you have a song for us to close?
Thank you, Tony. Well, this is a long one, so you can cut it anytime. It's Atahualpa Yupanqui, Milonga del Peón de Campo, and it's an interesting topic of the worker talking to the patron in a imaginary situation, but it's a very interesting. It's in décima from Argentina. Yo nunca tuve tropilla, siempre montado en ajeno. Tuve un zaino que de bueno ni pisaba la gramilla. Llevo una vida sencilla, como la del pobre peón. Madrugón tras madrugón, con lluvia, escarcha o pampero, a veces me duele fiero los hígados y el riñón. Soy peón de la estancia vieja partida de Madaleno, y aunque no valga la pena, anote que no son quejas. Un portón lleno de rejas y allá en el fondo un chalet. Lo recibirá un ballet que anda siempre disfrazado. Mas no se asuste, cuñado, y por mí pregúntele. Ni se le ocurra decir que viene pa' visitar. Diga que viene a cobrarme y le han de dejar paz. Allí le van a indicar que siga los eucaliptos. Allá en el fondo verá un ranchito que han levantado estas manos. Esa es su casa, paisano, y ahí puede pegar el grito. Allí le voy a mostrar mi mancarrón, mis dos perros, unas espuelas de fierro y un montón de cosas más. Si es entendido verá poncho de fina trama y el retrato de mi mamá con el que rezo pensando mientras lo voy acordando con florcitas de retama. ¿Qué puede ofertarle a un peón que no sean su pobreza? A veces me entra tristeza y otras veces rebelión. En más de alguna ocasión quisiera hacerme perdiz pa' volar y ser feliz por algún pago lejano. Pero la verdad, paisano, me gusta el aire de aquí.
Bravo. Gracias, Abel.
Gracias, Tony. Gracias a todos. Gracias. Muchas gracias.
Yeah. So thank you all so much for joining us this evening for Arte Justicia, part of the Deep Roots New Branches series presented by Early Music Seattle. Thank you to the staff and board at Early Music Seattle for supporting this series. We're excited to begin work on developing a series for next season as well. So make sure that you're signed up for your e-news from Early Music Seattle to stay up to speed. And we thank you for your comments and questions. And we look forward to seeing you next time. Buenas noches. Gracias, Abel.
Gracias, Tony. Gracias. Muchas
gracias. Y les vaya bien para todos.
Gracias, gracias.